Self-realization is the innate state of the self. And the self always is just as it is. It is unchanging. Self-realization, or the state of the self, is not a state for the individual. The jiva or individual neither seizes it nor loses it. When, though, through profound inquiry resulting in self-knowledge, you realize the non-existence of the ego or jiva, that which remains, which has actually always been the case, is the real state of the self. And that is called self-realization. What you are can never be defined, and therefore never confined, by any state of the mind, and of course by any state of the body or senses. What you are, pure being consciousness, is transcendent of every state of mind, of waking, of dreaming, of deep dreamless sleep. Though you alone appear as consciousness, as all these states, this very consciousness, your true self, can never be said to be in these states. Whatever appears to you in any state of mind cannot be you. And you are free of all that. Therefore, in your inquiry to know the self, abandon the misidentification with anything, be it a thought or a group of thoughts, or a whole herd of thoughts. Abandon the misidentification with anything that appears within any state of mind. In spiritual practice, as a pragmatic point, it is most useful to give up the misidentification with anything that appears in the waking state, whatever seems to constitute the waking state individual. If that much is accomplished, what pertains to the dreaming state individual and the deep sleeper, if we can call him such, will be taken care of automatically. Whether it be the body or the senses, or any attribute of the mind, any way of thinking that appears in the waking state, abandon the misidentification with all of that. And know yourself to be the consciousness, formless, unconditioned, that stands ever transcendent. There is no individual who becomes consciousness. That is spoken of only loosely as merger with the Supreme Self. There is one self. It is the infinite consciousness. It mingles with none, and none mingles with it. For it alone is the reality. And otherness, from the individual down to the forms of the world, is simply false. So, inquire in such a manner that your identity is established in knowledge as this unformed, unborn, indestructible being, consciousness, bliss. Do not so much seek a state, any kind of mental state, in which the individual can rest. For all states are changeful and unreal. How could you rest in that? Moreover, you are not the individual or ego. There can be no rest in the unreal, and the real is already at rest. Dive within and know it for yourself. And if you have a question, please feel free to ask. Or if you wish to relate your own experience, please feel free to speak.
Two questions. First, as driving here this morning, listening to the discourse from an earlier song when you were talking very much about still what you're talking about this morning, there's a part in the discourse where you were discriminating from gross to subtle. And here, particularly, I found myself responding to a part of that where you were talking about not the mind, not the thoughts, not the intellect, not the thinking, and you got to not the thinker. And I noticed reaction on the not the thinker, and in meditating at that time, see that in fact that's still an identity that I hold to some, that I haven't examined, as I have some of these, and wanted to speak to you this morning and ask about that, because it's another point of clarity that and I need to come to.
We can start with something that is very basic to observe. Do you have thoughts or a thinking process all of the time?
Okay. No, I have knowing all the time, and I think as I looked at it myself, there may be still confusion between thinking and knowing. Because I don't have thoughts all the time. and I don't have thinking all the time, but there's knowing is, of course, always there.
So knowing is present with or without the thinking process, with or without thought. So the knower must be independent of the notion of a thinker. The thinker is one who thinks. The thinker is not existing all the time. He's only apparent some of the time. But you are existing all of the time, both with and without thought. Your existence is unchanging, neither rising nor setting. The thinker somehow rises or appears. He seems as if the subject of the thoughts. Without thought, what becomes of the thinker? The thinker has no knowing ability. It's an assumed disguise, an apparent identity formulated out of the false combination, the illusory combination of thought and consciousness.
That's very clear. Thank you for that. I also want to ask another question from Ruth. Last night, as we were reading aloud, which is still a usual thing to do, there was a series of verses that particularly caught my attention at the time. And if I may read one and then ask the question. So this is from chapter 29, Constant Meditation on the Nature of Pure Reality, verse 25, and it says, "Hence, all texts should be thrown aside once their meanings are digested, like throwing off the husk after obtaining the grain. Having thrown away the texts which have become a disadvantage, one should practice daily, helpful, constant meditation, intently for gaining complete knowledge." And so, of course, I noticed myself as I was rereading a text, this verse that seemed to say, don't keep rereading these texts, but practice.
The spiritual instruction in Ribu is one of knowledge and not one of action. So the meaning of the verse cannot be the action of tossing aside the book. If one merely tosses aside the book, the only thing that has occurred is the book has moved from one spatial location to another, but nothing much has been accomplished spiritually. So what does it mean to toss aside the text?
Well, to me, to toss aside the text means to self-plunge into the experience.
Which is the meaning of the text. So what changes must be the approach to that meaning of the text. What changes is a transformation from approaching the meaning as if it were a topic contained in a text to an approach that is non-objective, based on inquiry.
So reading the text like one learns to listen to a discourse or a satsang, where it really is not hearing some story, some logical presentation and taking it in with the mind, but rather, listening, reflection, meditation.
Yes, listening, reflection, and meditation, because if you take the former approach that you just described, just trying to grasp it through the intellect, you limit the meaning to the size of the concepts.
You'll miss it all together, I think.
Again, Points Ribbu says that the text should be recited again and again, or read every day.
That's right, that's right.
There's only two possibilities. You need to approach it through knowledge, as we are doing now, or you have to interpret the text that Ribbu just can make up his mind, giving contradictory advice. The latter is not plausible.